As the tradition beautifully states, Swechaya Sobhito Vishwam Unmilayate. By its own free will, consciousness unfolds the universe upon its own screen. What all beautiful scientific basic concept which our theory, Kashmiri Shaivism, has put forward. The same Abhinavagupta, who writes as a theologian of Krama and Trika, also writes as commentator on the Natya Shastra. For him, rasa in theatre and rasa in mystical experience are not two unrelated domains. They are expressions of one underlying reality, the self tasting itself. Modern Bharat inherited political maps, lines drawn to delineate provinces, states, districts. Ancient Bharat lived through spiritual maps, networks of tirthas, circuits of pilgrimage, mandala-based visualization of space. It is with a deep humility and sense of civilizational responsibility that I stand before you today at this international seminar on Krama and cultural flows, Kashmir Shaivism between the north and south of Bharat. Some might have noticed the subtle change I have made in the title. I haven't said that North and South India. I have said North and South of Bharat. Somewhat our Honorable Chairperson has already mentioned about that division. I have deliberately rendered the title in this manner. For the terms we use already shape the frames within which we think. The familiar division of North India and South India, though convenient in modern discourse, belongs largely to colonial cartography and administrative logic. Our civilizational sources speak instead of Uttara Patha and Dakshina Patha, not as opposed cultural blocks, but as interconnected cultural corridors through which texts, rituals, ideas, teachers, and metaphysical insight traveled. This indigenous vision of space is beautifully captured in the Puranic assertion, Ekamevahi Tattvam Bahutha Pradibhati. The one reality appears in many forms. To speak of the north and south of Bharat, therefore, is not to invoke a binary, but to recall a spatial imagination in which cultural flows precede borders, movement precedes maps, and unity is sustained through circulation rather than uniformity. In this sense, our gathering today is not merely an academic exercise, it is also an act of decolonial remembrance, an attempt to recover how this civilization has historically known itself across time, space, language, and social form. Now, let us think about the speciality which I found in this seminar. Most conferences are organized around themes. This one, I would suggest, is organized around a question. What does it mean for a civilization to remember itself after centuries of colonial interruption and ideological distortion? When we speak of Krama and cultural flows, when we invoke Kashmir and Kerala in a single breath, we are entering into a reflection that moves far beyond any single text or region. We are in truth asking how Bharat knows itself, how it has historically known itself, how that self-knowledge was obscured, and how it might be reclaimed in our own time. That is what which I have already mentioned, that we all have that civilizational responsibility to fulfill. Here, we have to think about the very concept of nation itself. When we are talking about the continuity of this nation, right from the north to south or south to north, that is all about the Rashtra or nation. At the outset itself, let us think about Rashtra first of all. There are three types of thinking about the Rashtra concept or nation concept. First two are very much against the very concept of nation or Rashtra. Both of them are not considering this nation as an ancient one, even one. They are not considering it as one. So I have put two names for them, that ideologies. First one is Navarashtravada. To understand it, I would take a phrase from a famous speech, the Tryst with Destiny speech. I would like to take that particular phrase used by that great man from the Red Fort while he spoke. We are a nation in making. So from that particular phrase, you could understand that they are not believing in the nation itself. They are not considering that this nation exists before. Neither in the past nor in the present, and need not be in the future. Why I said so? If we are saying that we are making this nation, it was not a nation in the past. When we are making now, it is not a nation now also. There is a 50-50 chance to become a nation in the future. That's all. So 2.5 out of 3, they are negating the existence of the nation. That is Navarashtravada. It came into existence only after the Britain constructed the railway line. English government has established the post offices. Then we have started becoming a nation. That is Navarashtravada or neo-nation concept. Second one, that is Bahurashtravada, multi-nation concept. Not one, it is many. A multiculturalism. And all these aspects are being told by some people, I don't want to name anyone, but they are also not considering this nation ever existed as one. But there is a concept, I feel, that we are all believing, those who have come for this conference, that is Chira Rashtravada, a permanent Rashtra concept. It was there even before Veda came into existence. This nation was there. That is why in the Vedas itself, there is mentioning about Rashtra. If there was no nation before nation, there can never be a nation concept in the Veda. Samudra Paryanta Ekarat. Up to Samudra, right from Himalayas, there is a Rashtra. It is there. And also in Atharva Veda, how Rashtra came into existence has been clearly spelt out, clearly defined. Bhadramichanda Rishaya Survida Tapo Dikshamupasedu Regre Tato Rashtram Belamojas Chajadam Tadasmai Deva Mupasannamantu. The whole Devatas are giving namaskara to Rashtra, which was born out of the tapasya of the great rishis, did the tapasya for the welfare of the whole, not for him or his wife or his family. He did the tapasya for the Sorvida. This Sorvida concept is very much there in all theories, all traditions, all granthas of Bharata. Sarvepi Sukhinas Santu, Sarve Santu Niramaya. Everywhere you can see, even in the modern scriptures, like Vikramorvashiyam of Kalidasa, Sarvas Taradu Durgani, all must go beyond this Durga. So this Sorvida concept is there. That is the speciality of this Chirarashtravada. This Rashtra was there. It is here and it will be there. That is the Rashtra concept we are saying. There are so many people, they have very much supported this view. I would like to mention one great thinker Bharat has produced, that is none other than Dr. Babasaheb Bhimarao Ramji Ambedkar. Ambedkar, when he was participating in the anthropology seminar in Columbia University in 1916, he mentioned about this oneness of this nation. That is not a mere geographical oneness. That is not a mere political oneness. It is a cultural, indubitable cultural unity. Let me quote from his famous speech, which has been published in the name Caste in India. I quote, "It is the unity of culture that is the basis of homogeneity. Taking this for granted, I venture to say that there is no country that can rival the Bharat." He has said India, but I have got a bit difficulty in saying India. Naturally, Bharat is coming out of me. I don't know why that disease came to me. That can rival the Bharat with respect to the unity of its culture. It is not only a geographical unity, but it has over and above all a deeper and a much more fundamental unity. This prayoga, this usage, you please specifically attend. The indubitable cultural unity that covers the land from end to end. That is what which we are discussing today also. Kashmir Shaivism between north and south of Bharat. Between end to end of Bharat. This has been stated very clearly by Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar there in his most famous speech he delivered there in Columbia University. When we speak of national integration in contemporary Bharat, the conversation often remains confined to political structures, administrative unity, or constitutional definitions. While these are undoubtedly important, they represent only the outer framework of unity. Bharat was never held together merely by political power. Long before the idea of modern nation-state emerged, Bharat existed as a deeply integrated cultural and spiritual organism. Her unity arose not from uniformity, but from a shared metaphysical vision that allowed immense diversity to flourish without fragmentation. That I have already mentioned while I was explaining about the Chira Rashtra Vada. Yet under colonial rule, this organic unity was systematically misunderstood and at times deliberately misrepresented. Bharat was described as a mosaic, a congeries of races, an artificial assemblage of mutually hostile regions and communities. Our philosophical traditions were presented as abstract, world-denying speculations. Our rituals were relegated to the domain of superstition. Regional forms like Teyyam were catalogued as folk survivals, devoid of philosophical content, while refined metaphysical traditions like Kashmiri Shaivism were either ignored or treated as esoteric curiosities. See, that's also a colonial construct that somewhat neglecting, belittling something very much valuable for Bharat as folk. This folk concept itself is a derogatory, erroneous concept. They have divided the whole society into two. One as a classic, modern, scientific society or urban-centered society. Others as folk. What does folk means? It's a Gramscian concept. At the first instance itself, I would like to say the folk itself is a Gramscian concept. If you want to use something, you have to use lok. Lok is much beyond folk. There is not much time to elaborate about that, but we have to challenge these type of colonial binaries. That is the main necessity of these type of academic discussions. A truly decolonial approach must begin by challenging these frames. It must refuse the split between high philosophy and low ritual, between pan-Indian and local, between spiritual north and sensual south, between textual Brahmins and performative subalterns. Such binaries are not our inheritance. They are the residue of a gaze that did not understand how this civilization lives, thinks, and remembers. So, two aspects are very much important, significant here. One is challenging the so-called frames, and another is reversing the gaze. We have to reverse the gaze. The framework is to be changed, and our gaze. We are looking at something from a particular standpoint. That is the whole problem which we are facing now. So we have to change the gaze. Now, what is the ground reality, or ground of reality, or the foundation of the reality? At the heart of our civilizational vision lies the understanding that reality itself is consciousness, bodha. Kashmir Shaivism articulates this with extraordinary clarity in the simple yet radical declaration, Chaitanyam Atma. The self is consciousness itself. Consciousness here is not an epiphenomenon of matter, not a byproduct of brain chemistry, not a passive witness standing apart from the world. It is vibrant, creative, and self-luminous. The Kashmiri Mahanaya Prakasha begins by paying obeisance to Shiva, whose very body is composed of consciousness. Sriman Mahaprakasha Vapuse Shivaya Namaha. That is what which being explained absolutely about Shiva. It is consciousness that becomes the universe, not through necessity or compulsion, but through freedom, through liberty. As the tradition beautifully states, Swechaya Sobhito Vishwam Unmilayate. By its own free will, consciousness unfolds the universe upon its own screen. What all beautiful scientific basic concept which our theory, Kashmiri Shaivism, has put forward before the society. This vision directly challenges modern epistemology, which tends to treat consciousness as something to be explained away. Our tradition reverses the gaze. It begins from lived awareness and sees matter, language, society, and history as configurations within it. This is not anti-scientific. It is a deeper understanding of what it means to know. We have to think much deeper about that particular statement which they have made, that Kashmiri Shaivism, whether it is a metaphysical system alone or something beyond. Definitely, those who have gone deep into Shaivism, you will find to know that it is dharmic or ethics. It is also about a social vision, a samajik darshan. If consciousness alone is ultimately real, and if all beings are expressions of that same consciousness, then no social hierarchy can claim ultimate validity. No human being can be ontologically inferior. Distinctions of caste, language, region, or gender belong to the realm of social convention, not to the truth of being. In this sense, Kashmir Shaivism is not only a metaphysical system, it is also a profound ethical and social vision. It is not content with saying all is one. In some abstract way, it presses us to ask what that means for how we treat one another in everyday life. We never consider anyone as other. As far as Bharatiya thought system, especially Kashmir Shaivism, there is no other. We are not believing in otherism. See how beautifully Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore has put it in his famous book, Swadeshi Samaj. I would like to quote 2 or 3 sentences. I quote, "To feel unity in diversity, to establish unity amidst variety, that is the underlying dharma of Bharat. Bharat does not regard difference as hostility. She does not regard the other as enemy. That's why, without sacrifice of destruction, she wants to accommodate everybody within one great system. That is why she accepts always and sees the greatness of each in its own sphere." This same insight, when we apply it to the field of knowledge itself, leads to a decolonial imperative. If the one consciousness expresses itself in many forms, then Sanskrit Shastra and Malayalam Mandra or Kannada Mandra, Kashmiri philosophical verse and North Kerala oral performance or South Kannada oral performance are not to be ranked as high and low. They are different modalities of a shared intelligence. To dismiss oral or performative traditions as merely folk, to valorize only what appears in printed critical editions, is to replay in the academy the very hierarchies that Tantra and Shaivism often work to subvert on the ritual ground. Tantra in general and Kashmiri Shaivism in particular refuse to confine truth within rigid boundaries. That's also we all, those who are participating here are well versed in these type of theories, so I don't want to explain it much. We all are finding that beauty in Tantra and Kashmiri Shaivism in particular. Tantra is expansive by nature. It does not reject the world. It sanctifies it. It does not flee from embodiment. It divinizes it. Knowledge in the tantric worldview is not restricted to a privileged elite, to a single language, or to a single geography. It flows, adopts, transforms, and incarnates itself wherever the conditions are ripe. Arbitrary social barriers, linguistic limitations, and rigid conventions were not merely questioned, they were experientially transgressed. This expansive vision finds one of its most refined philosophical articulations in the Krama system. Krama affirms that absolute is not static or frozen perfection, but dynamic, pulsating awareness. Shakti stands at the center of this vision, not as a subordinate principle, but as the very power of manifestation. Every perception, every act of knowing, every ritual moment is a movement in this cosmic rhythm of consciousness recognizing itself. Krama gives us an indigenous model of thinking about plurality and historical process. See, here when we are thinking about this, there is a problem with this modern political discourse about all these things. It swings between two extremes. That's a problem which when we are engaging in the modern politics, we are not supposed to engage in that dirty business, but we are living in that condition. That's why I'm saying there's a problem with this modern political discourse. What are those two extremes? One is homogenizing centralization on the one hand and fragmentary identity politics on the other. Krama offers a different imagination. It shows us how stages can be recognized without absolutizing any one stage. How difference can be honored without losing sight of the underlying unity. It is a metaphysical corrective to both authoritarian uniformity and nihilistic fragmentization. Kashmir, as we know, occupies a unique place in this story. We are discussing about Kashmiri Shaivism and the connection with South. It is the land where this vision received its most explicit and rigorous articulation. In its Shaiva and Shakta traditions, Kashmir developed an intellectual culture in which reasoning, experience, and ritual mutually informed one another. Non-dualism here was not a mere slogan. It was carefully argued in dialogue with Buddhist logicians and Nayayikas. It was cultivated through meditative and ritual practices, and it was reflected upon in aesthetic and linguistic theory. The same Abhinavagupta, who writes as a theologian of Krama and Trika, also writes as commentator on the Natya Shastra. For him, rasa in theatre and rasa in mystical experience are not two unrelated domains. They are expressions of one underlying reality, the self tasting itself. the self tasting itself. Instead of forcing Kashmir Shaivism into modern frames, we should allow Kashmir Shaivism to question those frames. Instead of treating its rituals and myths as embarrassing add-ons to an otherwise philosophical system, we treat them as integral to how that philosophy is lived and known. And instead of seeing Kashmir as an isolated peak of refinement, we pay attention to the networks through which its ideas, mantras, and practices traveled across the nation. As this Kashmiri wisdom traveled southward, we are talking about Kerala, but I would like to speak something about Karnataka also, because we are partly Karnataka and Kerala here. As this Kashmiri wisdom traveled southward, it did not pass over Karnataka like a shadow. It took root and cross-pollinated. In the 12th century, Karnataka witnessed a spiritual revolution through Basavanna and Veerashaiva movement. Veerashaivism and Vachana tradition has its philosophical underpinnings in Kashmiri Pratyabhijna. Consider the philosophy of Shakti Vishishtadvaita. Like the Kashmiri masters, the Sharanas of Karnataka rejected the idea of the world as a falsehood, Maya. For them, the world is the Leela, play of Shiva. The Veerashaiva concept of Anga, Linga, Samarasya, the identity of the soul and the divine, is the poetic and practical equivalent of the Kashmiri recognition, Pratyabhijna, took different avatar, reformulated Advaitic vision, and became not just some philosophy, a way of life, embodied knowledge. This connection, I think, the Vachana of Allama Prabhu often echoes the void or Shunya concept found in the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, a key Kashmiri text. When Allama speaks of the light within the light, he is speaking the language of Prakasha, the self-luminous light of Pratyabhijna. So this connection can also be discussed in detail. It is here that Kerala, and especially North Kerala, emerges as a vital partner in our reflection. Kerala is often described in contemporary discourse through cliches as God's own country, as a land of backwater and literacy, as the home of Ayurveda and Kathakali. Rarely is it recognized as a crucible of tantric embodiment, a region in which metaphysical intuitions find expression in extraordinary sophisticated ritual forms. To see Kerala in this way requires a decolonial shift of gaze. It requires us to take seriously what earlier administrators and ethnographers often dismissed as devil dancing, exorcism, or village cults. In North Kerala, the traditions of Teyyam, Kalameluttum Pattu, sacred groves and village Bhagavati temples, together with a highly developed corpus of temple tantra, constitute a living archive of non-dual Shakta Shaiva imagination. These traditions do not write commentaries on the Shiva Sutras. They embody its insights in blood and fire, costumes and gestures, possession and blessing. To watch a Teyyam performance with philosophical sensitivity is to see concepts like Shakti, Krama, Avesha, Anugraha, hierarchy, and transgression. So we have to, when we are watching a Teyyam, with that philosophical sensitivity, we can all identify, we can be one with that Shakti, Krama, Avesha, Anugraha, hierarchy, and that transgression we could feel. Consider again the figure of the Teyyam performer possessed by a fierce goddess, Mahachanda Yogeshwari herself. His social identity in the ordinary caste hierarchy might be low, yet in that ritual moment, he is the highest. People of all strata come before him, offer him gifts, seek his blessing, listen to his words as divine commands. If we approach this phenomenon through a colonial lens, we see only inversion. Perhaps temporary release, something to be filed under ritual rebellion. But if we approach it through the lens of Kashmir Shaiva metaphysics, we can see more. We can see the enactment of a truth proclaimed by Krama. Here the decolonial and the tantric converge. Tantra, when understood on its own terms, already undermines essentialist notions of social hierarchy. It has already said that this is a social vision also. Samajik Drishti. A decolonial reading recognizes and honors this subversive potential without reducing it either to modern liberal categories or to raw anthropology. It allows us to say this ritual is not just a pre-modern spectacle, it is also a sophisticated mode of articulating the non-dual Advaita. It is in its own language a commentary on Chaitanyam Atma. In the same region, the textual continuities we noted earlier further support this view. The composition of Bala Vimshati by Legu Bhattaraka in or near Nileshwaram, Nileshwaram is near Kanjangadu, and its incorporation into the Panchastavi, important in the religious life of Kashmiris who still follow the native tradition, in a concrete instance of what sustained this civilization. The ability of this culture to move between regions, languages, and forms without loss-spilling its metaphysical core. A hymn born in the ecosphere of Kerala becomes nourishment for the devotional life of Kashmir. A Krama Shakta conceptuality forged in Kashmir finds ritual embodiment in Kerala. This is not linear influence. It is mutual participation in a shared field. Our work is not only critiquing Western categories. Some may think that I have started with criticizing Western view or gaze or something. But our work is not just mere criticizing. It is also, and perhaps more importantly, about recovering these inner linkages, seeing how places like Kashmir and Kerala have always been in dialogue, how Sanskrit and regional language have cross-fertilized, how high philosophy and so-called low ritual actually belong to one continuum. It is about reclaiming our own categories, Krama, Spanda, Shakti, Pratyabhijna, as living tools for thinking rather than as philosophical museum pieces. Let us look more closely at the notion of cultural flows in this light. Colonial accounts often describe the cultural influence in Bharat as something that flowed one way, from an imagined Aryan center to local peripheries, or from Sanskrit to vernaculars. Later, in some nationalist retellings, this narrative was inverted but not fundamentally challenged. Now the periphery asserted itself against the center. What remains under-examined is the older civilizational reality in which center and periphery were not hard opposites, in which Sanskrit and regional languages were part of one overlapping continuum, in which ritual and philosophy informed one another. Krama speaks of sequences, but not of absolute beginnings or ends. Each stage emerges from the one before and prepares the one after. Each stage emerges from the one before and prepares the one after. No stage is everything. No stage is nothing. The same can be said of our regional and textual traditions. Kashmir is not the origin of Shaiva thought, nor is Kerala a mere derivative. Each is a crystallization of a wider field. To map influence solely from north to south or south to north is to miss the deeper dynamic in which both participate. Why I have given much emphasis to this particular point, you are all intelligent people, you can understand. Some are nowadays saying that it has gone from here to there. Some sort of superiority mentality, rebellious mentality against the established facts. Similarly, the distinction between spiritual geography and political geography becomes crucial in our perspective. Modern Bharat inherited political maps, lines drawn to delineate provinces, states, districts. Ancient Bharat lived through spiritual maps, networks of tirthas, circuits of pilgrimage, mandala-based visualization of space, routes traveled by monks and mendicants, by bards and teachers, by tantric gurus and their disciples. In such a world, what mattered was whether a place fit into a sacred geography, not whether it fell on this or that side of modern boundary. That particular sentence also has got great meaning also. Okay. Pilgrimage routes ignored distance. Mantra lineages flowed across mountains and rivers. A Kashmiri adept could travel south, bringing with him a lineage of Shakta mantras. A Kerala Tantric could travel north, seeking initiation in a particular Krama stream. These movements were not recorded in colonial gazetteers. They lived in oral lineages, in temple chronicles, in the subtle resemblances between rituals far apart. To rebuild even a partial sense of this spiritual geography is a decolonial project of the highest order, because it allows us to see our own land anew, not as a patchwork of states, but as a living mandala. The Pidhas invoked by the practitioner in his own body assert that the nation's geography is made alive by sites that pulsate and radiate Shakti. The individual and the collective are not fundamentally different. Veshti and Samashti. Akhanda mandalagaram vyaptam yena characharam tatpadam darshitam yena tasmai Sri Gurave Nama. When we are talking about Guru, Guru is such a person who gives this knowledge about this mandala, this Akhanda mandala kara. Brahmayamala speaks of a series of 9 lotuses, spans the body's axis from crest, that is Shikha, to feet, linked by a thread called Shakti Tandu. It further says, Nadhyatmena bina vahyam, Nadhyatmam bahya varjitam, Siddhe jnanakriyabhyam, Tadvitiyam samprakashate. So, the periphery and the center both are important and both are illuminating mutually. The pair of inner and outer illuminate together through gnosis and ritual. And the inner and outer are incomplete individually. In this spiritual geography, Kashmir and Kerala stand close to each other. They are both strong nodes of Shiva Shakti worship. Both places where Tantra flourished in sophisticated forms. Both regions where non-dual insights found enduring expression. To bring them into conversation, as this seminar does, is not to artificially link to a stream of a map. It is to realign our vision with an older pattern that colonial modernity blurred. Let me now turn more explicitly to the question of national integration, understood in a Bharatiya sense. Bharat will remain united, I said earlier, not by fear or force, but by shared spiritual memory. This is not a pious slogan. It is a historical observation. Empires held territories together through force. This civilization held itself together through recognition. Through the recognition of common narratives, shared sacred figures, overlapping ritual forms, and a broadly aligned vision of reality. So, let me conclude it as fast as I could. When Kashmir is reduced only to a political issue, a security question, a zone of contestation, we lose its civilizational meaning. When Kerala is reduced only to tourism, carnival, or ideological battlegrounds, we lose its metaphysical depth. To reclaim both, we must reinscribe them into the story of Bharat as a consciousness civilization. It is being said that without Bharat, Kashmir is dangerous. Without Kashmir, Bharat is incomplete. In the same way, without Kerala, Bharat is incomplete. Without Bharat in Kerala, Kerala is dangerous. So in that way also we have to think this aspect. Shaivism, especially in its Krama and Trika articulations, reminds us that unity does not erase diversity and difference does not threaten coherence. Krama teaches us that the stages do not cancel one another. These are the days of cancel culture. They fulfill and deepen one another. Similarly, regions do not negate the nation. They complete it. A decolonial Bharatiya nationalism must be built on this insight. It cannot be a nationalism of flattening, of demanding sameness, nor can it be nationalism of perpetual grievance. It must be a nationalism of Krama, recognizing the many forms in which the one consciousness of this land has manifested and allowing them to enrich one another. As scholars, we have a twin responsibility. We must, on the one hand, master the tools of rigorous historical and philological research. We must know our Abhinavagupta as well as any Indologist. We must read our Kerala Tantras as carefully as any textual critic. On the other hand, we must refuse to be confined by the frames that came with those tools. We must dare to interpret our materials in ways that speak to our civilizational needs, that contribute to our collective self-understanding, not just to academic debates in far-off journals. This does not mean romanticizing the past or ignoring real conflicts and problems. It means reading our sources with a double vision, attentive to their historical context, and also attentive to their potential as resources for thinking today. When Kashmir Shaivism insists that every act of cognition is already vimarsha, reflective awareness, and that bondage arises from contracted forms of that awareness, we might ask, how has our collective awareness been contracted by colonial narratives? When Kerala's Chaitanyam traditions enact the divinization of the marginal body, we might ask, how can this imagery help us rethink social justice in terms deeper than imported ideologies? I'm underlying imported ideologies. On our own base, we have to see all these things. Let me move then towards a more contemplative close without losing the decolonial thread. Bharat, in the deepest sense, is not held together by roads or railways. Though we are grateful for those, it is held together by recognition, pratyabhijna. The very school of Kashmir Shaivism that refined the doctrine of recognition can serve as a metaphor for the work ahead of us. When the limited self recognizes itself as Shiva, bondage loosens and freedom dawns. When a region recognizes itself in another region, the chains of narrow identity begin to soften. When Kashmir recognizes itself in Kerala and Kerala recognizes itself in Kashmir, Bharat recognizes itself. This seminar, therefore, is not merely about the study of Krama. In a subtle way, it is Krama. It is one more step in a long sequence of civilizational self-remembrance. Each paper presented, each conversation held over tea, each connection made across disciplines and regions is part of that sequence. In coming together here, in invoking both Kashmir and Kerala, in placing philosophy beside ritual, text beside performance, we are quietly defying the fragmenting logic of colonial modernity. We are saying these belong together. They have always belonged together. May this remembrance deepen our scholarship, enrich our practice, and strengthen the invisible bonds that have always held this civilization together. May we leave this gathering not only with more information, but with a slightly clearer inner map of Bharat, in which the corridors between Kashmir and Kerala, between text and ritual, between philosophy and life are illuminated. May our scholarship become, in however small a way, an extension of sadhana, a disciplined, loving effort to see more clearly what is. And may the rhythm of Krama, the unfolding and recollection of consciousness, be felt quietly but unmistakably in the way we think, speak, and act together. If we can allow Krama to be not just a subject of study but a way of being, if we can honor the sequence of experiences, the diversity of expressions, while holding fast to the unity of consciousness, then this seminar will have done more than produce proceedings. It will have contributed, however modestly, to the decolonial task of recentering Bharat in her own categories, of allowing this land to know herself again as a consciousness civilization. Thank you. Om Namah Shivaya.